In this lesson, we will learn how to use Max's Reaction Manager. The Reaction Manager is really neat because it allows us to control parameters in a relative way, as opposed to simply wiring parameters, where the master parameter will directly control the parameter that has been wired to it. So what we'll do is go ahead and use the Reaction Manager to have the character's hand ball into a fist. We'll make sure that our custom parameter we will soon create will cause the hand to go into a fist gesture when we reach 100%, and then when we reach a value of 0, it'll go back to this rest pose. So let's get started by creating our custom parameter. With our ARM control selected, we'll use the hotkey Alt-1 to grab our parameter editor. We can start with a category first. So let's go ahead and switch our type to string, and we'll name this hand. And then for the default text, which we can add here, we'll name this hand control. So now, you can go ahead and add this, and then add the animatable channel, which we will name fist. So let's go ahead and make this a float type. We'll name the parameter. And now, just taking a look at the range, this is exactly what we want. At 0, we want the hand to be at this neutral pose, and at 100%, we want it balled into a fist. So let's go ahead and choose Add. We're now ready to work with the Reaction Manager. Let's head over to the Animation menu, and we'll go ahead and grab it. It's right underneath Animation Layers. And at first glance, this might seem pretty intimidating, pretty daunting, but I'll tell you what, this is very fun to use. We use it in courses like rigging faces to make sure that the jaw deforms naturally. And we also use it in our rigging wings tutorial to create an automated wing fold. So you can use this for some really neat functionality. Now what we need to do first is define a master parameter, what will control everything. And that is going to be the custom parameter we just made. So let's go ahead and click on Add Master. Now we need to click the object that we would like to acquire the master parameter from. So we'll choose Modified Object, Extra Controls, Custom Attribute, and here it is, fist. The next thing we need to do is define our set of slave channels. So those are the channels that will be controlled by our master channel, fist. Now, very important, we can have several slave channels to one master, but that does not work in reverse. However, we can get that type of control using things like expressions, and we'll take a look at how to work with expressions to create a really neat twist rig to hold volume. So we'll get to that shortly. But so we don't get ahead of ourselves, let's go ahead and add our slave parameters. Now there are a few ways we can do this. We can go ahead and choose Add Slave, but that means we'd have to pick each object one at a time. The next option here is going to allow us to add the parameter based off of what we have selected. So that's going to work out better for us. Before we go ahead and start to add any slave parameters, let's go ahead and take a look at what axis we need to control. So what we'll do is go ahead and hide our character's mesh just for now. We'll hide the arm layer and the armor layer. Next, let's go ahead and select one of the fingers and grab our rotate tool. We'll make sure that it's set to gimbal mode to show us the true axis of this object. So you can see it's the Z-axis we need to control. When we double click on this finger and start to curl it in, we should be able to see an additive rotation. If you do not see this, it simply means that your pivot mode is set to center. So instead, we want to set this to the object pivot using this first option at the top. So now when we start to curl this in, notice the type of finger movement we have now. All right, so this will make it much faster for us to curl this hand into a fist. Let's go through and start to select each bone that we want to add to the Reaction Manager. All right, so I'll just go through and start to control click each except for the nub. That will not be added. So we'll just go through, we'll grab the bones of the ring finger. When we get to the pinky, we'll make sure to grab the base, followed by the other bone objects, excluding again the nub. We won't worry about the thumb just yet. We'll go ahead and take care of it last. I find that to be easier to set up if we work on the other fingers first. All right, so with all of these selected, now we need to choose the parameter that should be controlled. So let's go ahead and choose Add Selected. It's the third icon. We'll choose Transform, Rotation, Zero Euler, and we'll grab the Z-axis. All right, so notice that will load in all of the parameters we need. Okay, great. So it's now time to create our max state. What we see here is our initial state, or our rest pose, where each finger is at a value of 0. If you do not see these values, it's simply because you did not freeze transforms on your bone objects, and we've covered this already, the importance of doing that. So we could start at this 0 position and make sure that when we use transform to 0, these bones will pop back to the neutral pose. If that's the case, you'd want to remove these parameters. You'd simply just go in, highlight them all, and you'd want to remove them as slave objects, and then go ahead and freeze transforms. The reason why is once they're tied to the reaction manager, we cannot move them until we enter create mode. All right? I'll go ahead and select this state here, and I'll also go ahead and remove that so we can start from scratch. So with all of these selected, we already have our master parameter. Let's go ahead and go back and define our slave parameter, which is the Z-axis. Okay, great. So now, let's take a look. If we were to try to move our bone objects, we cannot because the Z-axis is connected. We can move in other axes, but not the Z. So next what we need to do is enter create mode so we can ball the fist. But before we do that, let's go ahead and select our arm control and make sure that this goes to the max state, this fist channel. So we'll go ahead and set this to 100%, and now we can go in and curl the fingers into the pose we'd like them to be at when our fist channel reaches 100%. So let's go ahead and enter create mode. We'll go ahead and select each finger and start to just curl it in. We'll just double click and rotate in. Great. Now when we get to the pinky, we're not going to curl in the base just yet. Let's go ahead and curl in the other bones. And now we can go to the base and curl that in simply because it will not curl as much. All right, now we can test this out by going back to layers. We can go ahead and show our arm layer just to take a look at the pose. If you notice that anything needs to be tweaked, you most certainly can do so. Just go ahead and curl in some fingers in the Z-axis a bit more. All right, great. I think that's going to work out wonderfully. So we have this max state. What do we need to do now? We need to create a new state to save the max state. So once we choose create state, notice here we could see a transition from 0 to the values that we've used to pose the hand. Really neat. And of course we can go in and adjust this graph if we'd like. But very important to see this transition now from 0 to 100%, from our hand's neutral pose to the fist, we need to now exit create mode. That tells Max that, all right, we're done setting the state. Now let's go ahead and see what this does. When we go ahead and grab our arm control and start to adjust the fist, notice how we get this very smooth transition from our initial state to the fist. Very cool. All right, so let's go ahead and take care of the thumb next. We'll actually need to work with two parameters, not just the Z controller, but possibly the Y, so that it can rotate down and in. That's why we wanted to save it for last. All right, so again, we could go in and hide the arm layer. Let's make sure our fist is set to 0. And now we'll go ahead and select the thumb bones. We'll start with the Z-axis to get our curl. And with all of those selected, now we'll go ahead and make sure that the fist is chosen as our master. We're going to choose Add Selected. And again, it's going to be the Z-axis that we add. All right, great. So that has been added. We can go ahead and scroll down and take a look at the next set of states. The next thing we need to do is go to our arm control and set our fist channel to 100%. Now we can go to create mode and curl in the thumb. Okay, great. So I think that's going to work out. We will need to tweak the y-axis, so we'll go ahead and take care of that after we're done with the z-axis. So we've curled the finger in. Let's go ahead and save the state. We'll choose create state. Great, there's that transition. We can now exit create mode and take a look. We always want to test things out. So we can go ahead and start to adjust things, and notice there's our thumb rotation. All right, let's go ahead and add one more axis. And for this, we really just need to tweak the root here. No need to add any other states that we don't need. So I'll make sure that the fist is set back to 0. We'll go ahead and grab our root. Let's go ahead and now choose add selected. And we'll go ahead and grab the rotate y-axis. All right. So we'll go back to our fist channel, set this to 100%. We'll enter create mode. We'll grab the thumb root, and we'll go ahead and just bring this down a bit. All right, so that looks nice. So from there, we need to go ahead and create the state, exit create mode, and test this out. So now when we go back and start to adjust the fist parameter, there we have it. It might be nice to bring our geometry back. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll close out of the reaction manager. We'll go ahead and show our arm layer. And let's take a look. So now we have this really neat transition. Very cool. All right, so that's a look at how we can work with the reaction manager to drive parameters in a very relative way. If we were to go back to the reaction manager just to take a look, you can see that it's going to go ahead and save all of those states out, so you don't have to worry about reloading anything. So I just wanted to point that out to you as well. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with this system, again, feel free to take a look at courses like rigging faces as well as rigging wings and Max.